Great turnout. Thank you. Do appreciate it. It's with great pleasure that I'm able to introduce Dr Boon Lay Ong, a member of our Curtin family. Boon Lay is a senior lecturer in the School of Built Environment, as many of you will know, and there is no denying he is an academic of the highest quality. His experience spans multiple disciplines and stands as a testimony that an inquisitive mind can lead to a colourful life journey. From New Zealand to Singapore, Cambridge, Melbourne, and here now in Perth, please welcome Boon Lay.
Okay, many of you are in my class, so you know I'm a little bit passionate about my wife and kid, and they've been asking me about it, so there you go. The most beautiful woman in the world. Isn't she? I think she is. Okay, radio. I have always wanted to be an architect since I was like 12 years old. And when my father, who at that time was just a clerk of works, told me he couldn't afford to send me overseas to study architecture, in my heart I would say fine, or say fine. Okay, I'm an Asian, can't be rude to my dad. I was fine. I don't need you. I'll do it myself. Fortunately, he found this wonderful scholarship to study architecture, and he sent it to me. And as a result of that, I went to New Zealand to study architecture. Whilst I was there, okay, this is some of the things that happens in my work. While I was there, I became interested in a nice lady who was to become my wife. And she didn't finish a year of her studies in the same time as I. So of course I had to study more. So I started doing a master's in acoustics. And for the students who were in my class, you know how passionate I was, how it kind of inspired me, and I studied acoustics, came back. First thing they did, made me design the Victoria Memorial Hall. Very humbly, it is currently the hall with the best acoustics in Singapore. Yeah, because of this professor that I had, who was so good. Unfortunately, because I had this knowledge about acoustics, and at that time in the 70s, Singapore didn't have many people who knows much about acoustics, I became labeled as the acoustician. And everything that has to do with acoustics was thrown at me. So I decided to find ways not to be an acoustician because I still wanted to be an architect. And I found that when I was working in Singapore as a civil servant, as you go up the career ladder, you do less and less design. And I decided it was time for me to get out. So I went to NUS to teach. And interestingly, when I was talking to them about acoustics, they were very interested and excited, and they gave me a job. It's very nice when people pay you for doing things that you like, you know. And so I went to NUS and started teaching architecture in 1986. I was teaching a lot of acoustics at the time, and I did some auditorium consultancies then as well, like in this building here. Yeah. This is the SBC or auditorium for the Singapore equivalent of the ABC. But I was being treated as an acoustician, and I wanted to be an architect. So when my bond was over, I went to my head of department and told him that I was going to resign, finish my work, finish my bond, and come out and practice. He nearly fell off his chair, which was a very interesting sight to behold. And he said, wait. I won't spoil your career, young men like you, but give me 1 year and we'll see what happens at the end of 1 year. And within that 1 year phase, he revealed to me a dream in Singapore where they would send people like myself overseas on a scholarship to do a PhD, and they would collect about 12 PhDs trained in the best universities in the world. I'm from Harvard, I'm from Cambridge, I've got colleagues from Harvard, MIT, you name it, we were there. When we came back, we were 12 PhDs with architecture as the first degree in a school of architecture in 1997. The amount of talent there is unequaled in the world. Cambridge University did not have that many PhDs with their first degree in architecture. Most people who do the PhDs have their first degree in another subject. Yeah? Because for us, as you know, as architects, it's very hard for us to go into research. So to have that much talent in one place was incredible. And it was a very exciting time to be in. And of course, when you have so much talent in one place, guess what? We fight. Of course. Yeah? We were all leaders. There were no followers. Okay? So at the end of the day, to me, I think we screwed it. But I came back with a degree on landscape, not on landscape architecture. All right, let me rephrase that. When I was asked to do a PhD, the obvious thing to do was to do a PhD in acoustics. But that would make me an acoustician. So I had to do something different. And at that time, there was this interest in sustainable architecture in 1990, around that time. And there were a few words that were used to describe sustainable architecture: sustainable, ecological, environmental, and so on. And I suddenly realized that the word ecological refers to a discipline that you can go and study. And so I said, okay, I'll study ecology. And people who study ecology at that time don't really care a lot about the built environment. To them, ecology is nature. And people who care about architecture like us, we don't know much about ecology. And so when I get into a situation like that, I get very excited, and I decided that's what I'll do, because nobody's doing it. Yeah? Of course I was wrong. There was a lot of people doing it. And I then decided that as a result of looking into ecology, that the key to ecological architecture is a partnership with plants. All the air you breathe, all the oxygen is recycled by plants. All the food you eat come from plants. Okay? Most of our basic necessities, clean water, is recycled from plants. And yet, every time our population increases and we build more, we cut down trees. And so it was very obvious to me that the first thing you need to do is to develop a partnership with plants, with trees, and find ways to make our built environment more like an ecosystem. And I was talking with some of the year 3 students. Now they talk about architecture as forest. Okay, but I was thinking about that kind of thing way back in the 90s. Yeah? And so I decided that I would do my PhD on plants. Don't know anything about plants. Doesn't matter, I'm an architect. Who cares? Right? You guys know this, right? We don't care. Don't know anything, we'll do it anyway. Yeah? Don't know anything about plants. Ask me botany, I don't know anything about botany. But I went ahead, studied it because it's about architecture. And I found out some really interesting things. Most of the architectural styles that you look at, from the Egyptian to the Chinese to even the modern Art Nouveau, took their aesthetics from plants. A lot of our understanding about architecture stem from plants. a lot of our aesthetics comes from plants. So I did a PhD in which there was a chapter on aesthetics, another chapter on phenomenology. It got to a point where my professor sat me down and said, hey, hold on, you know, anyone can do a PhD. What you do is a scientific experiment. Okay, borrow something from the engineers, do the experiment, get the data, get the results. Then talk a bit about architecture at the beginning, talk a bit about architecture at the end. That's an architectural degree. Done. Okay? I want to be an architect. I can't do that. I had to do what I wanted. He told me another story. He said when he was a student, he had a friend who was the smartest person he ever knew. And this guy did a PhD on the relationship between mathematics and architecture. He was so smart that nobody stopped him. When he finished his PhD, they couldn't find anyone to examine him because no one has done it before. So they sent his PhD to a professor in architecture and a professor in mathematics. And the professor in architecture came back and said, oh, I don't know much about mathematics, but as far as the architecture is concerned, it's like general knowledge. We all know this. There's nothing really special or new. I don't think it's a PhD from the architecture point of view. Guess what? The mathematician said the same thing. He didn't get his PhD. That was the warning that was given to me. Yeah? But I want to be an architect. I don't care. So I ended up doing a PhD, submitted with all this nonsense in it. Okay? I was told so many times, don't do it this way. I wanted to be an architect. So I did it, submitted it. We found two examiners, one engineer, one architect. They came down and they said, you know, Boon Lay, your PhD has a good theory bit and a good technology bit. If you had done only one of them, don't do both, just do one of them. It would be a fantastic PhD. But you did both. Am I going to fail? Yeah. Then they said, we couldn't decide which one is better. I like the theory, but he likes the technology. Interestingly, it was the engineer who likes the theory and the architect who liked the technology. So we decided, since you did both reasonably well, we'll give you a PhD. Yeah. So when I came back from my PhD in Cambridge to Singapore, I became the landscape man. And the first thing they did was to ask me to start a landscape program. I'm not a landscape man. I want to be an architect. Nobody's listening to me. You know? So for years, I decided that I won't start a landscape program. And my career kind of halted. Doesn't matter. I want to do what I want. Okay? And you will see in there some of the projects that was done during that period. And I'll talk to you about some of the work that was done as well. It wasn't a total waste. Yeah? But towards the end, around 2010, I finally considered and said, okay, I will start a landscape program. And I did. I did start a landscape program for NUS before I came. Okay? So these are some of the work that I've done. And one of the things that I did that I'm particularly fond of has to do with my publication, I think, is this book called Beyond Environmental Comfort, which has just came out last year. The first two books came out while I was doing my PhD. There was an interesting story there as well. I was talking, I keep telling you, a lot of people told me that I shouldn't be doing a PhD that way. So I decided that I will publish a paper. It wasn't required. I decided I will publish a paper in a conference, and if they shoot me down, then I'll give it. Okay? So I went to the conference, presented my paper. They liked it so much, they published 2 books out of it. 2 weeks, before I finished my PhD. So when I came out, we, together with Philip Bay, we did a book, and then lately, I edited a book on beyond environmental comfort, because I wanted to go beyond the technology. And what was really interesting was that over the years, I had met so many professors who are experts in this field. And I told them that I will collect their best papers, whatever paper they want, and put them together. And you know what they told me? They said, look, we know you. We are not going to write those papers for you. We are going to write the papers that you like, that we think you like. So we have here a selection of papers on aesthetics. Sorry, it's not the one I want to open. Link. Yeah, so that's the book. On sensory pleasure, on consciousness and the senses, on cultural responses to primitive needs, things that you will never read in any environmental comfort book. And these are the best people in their field. Why? Because they know me. They know I'm a crazy guy. So they say, this is what they'll do. I even managed, okay, to get Yohani Plasma to write for me. Can you imagine that? Yohani Plasma writing on phenomenology in a book on heat, light, and sound. Really excited. I'm really, really pleased that I was able to do that. If you buy the book, please do go buy the book. It's a really good book. Yeah. I don't know if you know this lady, Constance Clarkson. She wrote a lot of material about the senses, together with her husband, David House. They wrote for me, and because they are contributors, they don't make any money out of it. Whatever royalties that goes from there goes. Yeah? So buy the book. Okay, so that was something that I did, which I really enjoyed. There's also something else which I wanted to share with you guys, and that has to do with this. Because I'm an architect, I don't write papers very well. Just to sit down and write something is really, really painful. I remember once telling myself, look, I really need to publish, because if I don't publish, I don't get promoted. I really need to publish. So I said, for 2 weeks, I'm going to sit down and write a technical paper. I knew what I was going to write. It wasn't difficult. I just had to make up my mind and do it. The next day, when I woke up, I didn't feel like getting out of bed. Life had no meaning. Right? So, I published this paper called Green Spot Ratio, which we don't really have time to talk about. But what I wanted to show in there is that when it was published in 2004, it had very few citations. But over the last 4 years, almost 10 years after it was published, it is now getting a lot of citations. And I think if there's anything that we as architects can contribute, is that we think further than any other profession. The ideas that we were talking about, that I was talking about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, takes time to get through. So I think architecture has a certain contribution to make, because we are trained to think of the future. And very few disciplines are trained to do that. Most disciplines are trained to think of the present and what can or cannot be done. Okay? And I think that that is something, that an area that we can contribute in. Okay? What else? So let's go back to that. Google citations. Yeah, I think that would. So, if we come back to the slide, we don't do Okay, need to bear with me. PowerPoint. Move on. Okay, so this is today's talk. You want to go? Is it? Yes. Okay, so today we want to talk about ecology and architecture, heat and thermal aesthetics. Guess what has happened? I still want to be an architect. And being branded as a landscape architect, you know, is beginning to lose its appeal. And I want to go back to the core of what I was really interested in. How do you design buildings that are ecological? What does that idea of turning architecture into ecology mean? A very interesting thing happened when I was editing the book. You remember I told you about this lady called Constance Casson who writes about the census? And she has a husband whose name is David Howells, and they both write a lot about census, touch, sight, all kinds of census. So I wrote to David Howells and said, would you guys mind writing a little article about heat? He turned back to me and said, why don't you write it yourself? So I decided to do research on it. And the more research I did, the more interested I became on this idea of heat. And then I decided that I will write a chapter for my book. It's my book, I can write what I like. Yeah? So I decided I will write a chapter for my book on heat. And then I sent it to him to edit. And I said, what do you think? You know, is it good enough? He read it, he says, I want to publish it. So he got the article and published it in his journal. Yeah? Which is why it's not published in this journal. And what I want to do with you, or with you today, is to talk about that idea that I stumbled upon, that I think is really incredibly exciting. Like this. Thank you. In the beginning, there was nothing. Literally nothing. There was no object, no life, nothing that could be described in any way that we can understand. The only thing that scientists were able to say about that time is that it was really, really hot. And the temperature is 10 to the power of 37 degrees centigrade. Let's have the lights on. Lights. You can't see me in the dark. Okay? That's the only thing. The beginning of the entire universe was just heat. It was so hot, within the first second, this thing, which they call the singularity, expanded, synthesized, created protons, neutrons, helium. It took 380,000 years to create the first atoms. It then took another 300 million years to create galaxies. And all the time, it was just this very, very hot singularity cooling down. For most of us, this part of the Big Bang is best understood as burning in reverse. If you think of burning, yeah, we take an object, we burn it, it becomes nothing. Kind of architectural explanation. Yeah, don't look for too much risk. What is happening here is the reverse. From very hot temperatures, things were being created. And the fire of the sun and the other stars is not combustion as we know. It's actually nuclear fusion. And so there is a reversal of sorts. That matter is created from fire. Whereas right now, we create fire from matter. As the universe expanded, matter coalesced to form fiery balls and cooled to form spherical planets. The reverse, when we explode something, we get fragments, jagged and sharp. So there's something really interesting happening there that is the reverse of our normal experience. Today, 13.7 billion years later, it is estimated there are 100 billion galaxies, each containing 100 billion stars and another 100 billion planets in the observable universe. What's going on? Wait, we are going in the wrong direction. Sorry. Behave. Yeah. Okay. So the Big Bang explosion is not our normal experience. It's actually our experience in reverse. And over 13.7 billion years, the universe is created. All of this, all the activity, movement, dynamics of the entire universe is ruled by laws of heat. And if you read about how or what they speculate about the universe, these four laws control it. In a way, the story of the universe is just a story of something very hot cooling down. As you know, our planet Earth is alive because of the sun and the energy that comes from the sun. So far as we know right now, it's the only planet with life. The planet Earth is protected by the atmosphere, and this atmosphere is again divided into different layers according to temperature. Not density, not skin, whatever, temperature. The sun, the low frequencies of the solar radiation are preferentially scattered by the air molecules, thus giving us a blue sky and a yellowish sun. Viewed tangentially during the evenings and mornings, the sky takes on additional hues and the sun turns red when it is viewed by the naked eye. So all this beauty, all this life is just the planet, the universe cooling down. As a result of that energy that is fed into the planet, water is evaporated from the oceans, evaporated by plants. There's a Gaia theory that says that nature, the living bodies in the planet, is maintaining the climate. And that climate that is maintained by life enables life. Three processes defines life: metabolism, respiration, and photosynthesis. All three of them involves burning. Respiration is just burning oxygen. That's all it is. And that keeps you alive. Metabolism is what happens when you burn that oxygen. And photosynthesis, of course, is the use of the sunlight, the energy from the sun, to create sugars and things like that. These three processes enable life on Earth. In humans, metabolic combustion generates at least 60 watts of energy. I think you guys know that. It can be increased 10 to 20 times during strenuous exercise. the currency of life, the currency of the ecosystem, the currency of the universe is energy. And the thing that control energy is heat. So when you look at the solar system, if you look at life, you can see that it is a system in which energy is money. And it accounts for everything. It is the price that you pay for everything. We can sense 4 different kinds of heat. Radiant heat, which is the heat from fires, for example. Sensible heat, when you touch something, how hot is it? Air movement, when the wind blows, you feel cooler. And humidity. These 4 aspects of heat corresponds to the 4 parameters by which we measure climate. The sun, air temperature, wind, and rain. Our sense of heat is our sense of climate. It is through the sense of heat that we know when to wear what, so that we can be sufficiently protected, so that we can do the things we need to do. When you can't sense heat, if you don't know when you are cold or hot, if you are losing too much energy or gaining too much energy, you die. It's as important as that. And there are many people, particularly the aged, who die because they can't sense heat. Heat is the measure of your balance between you and the environment. That's why it's so important. The importance of heat is found in mythology, in the myths or the mythology of fire. Many of you would know about the phoenix that rises from the fire. There's a very interesting theory by, who is this guy? Let me see. Gaston Bachelard. I don't know whether you know him. Right? He writes about architecture and various things. And he was writing about heat, and he reckons that the invention of fire came about not because somebody saw lightning hit the trees and then suddenly there's fire, but because they believed that spirits lived in the leaves and the branches. And the branch was a male spirit and the leaves was a female spirit. And what they're doing there is having sex. The Norse legend says that life was created when the boundary between the hot volcanic Muspelheim, I don't know, and the Niflheim combines in Ginnungagap, where life began, where the ocean is. You will see this idea of heat as something important in every culture. Among the Hindus, there's a god of fire called Agni that is the god of, again, sex, again, reproduction, marriage. And Hindu sages will carry a small fire as they travel to see where they're going. Over time, particularly in the daytime, they will carry a cloth, a saffron cloth, to represent the fire. And that was kind of one of the early forms of flags that we carried when we travel. So, the idea of heat as being central to our life is found in, of course, like in the Asian culture, Yin and Yang. Many of us today still think about the food we eat. Is it heating? Is it cooling? How do you balance it? What we think of less or is less aware of is that this idea of heat as being critical to our health can also be found in Western medicine and Western traditions. This idea came from Plato, where he decided or felt that the bile and humidity and temperature and so on inside your body created different types of personalities. So someone who is sanguine is cool in temperature, internally. And we still use a bit of those ideas now. We talk about someone being hot-tempered. What does that mean? And it came from this idea that the bile, the blood, represents different elements, and within these elements, you create temperature, heat, and cold. And notice that wet and dry is part of the sense of heat. So heat is really complex. It is a very important and significant part of our traditions, of our culture. What I want to then take you to is the idea that heat is how we experience aesthetics. The first time I talked about this, someone looked at me and thought I was mad. That's a good sign. Yeah? Particularly for us as Westerners, we think of heat, of aesthetics, as visual aesthetics. We don't think of heat as aesthetics. I hope to change your mind before the day is through. There was a theory by a lady called Jablonski that the reason why we are who we are today, upright, what you call the naked mammal, is because of this ability to control heat. I talked about how we can generate 10 to 20 times more energy or more heat to disperse when you are really active. It has been found that although the cheetah is the fastest animal, you can run further than the cheetah because he gets tired faster. He isn't able to balance his heat body as well. Okay? And Jablonski figures that the way we are able to control our temperature so well is because we can sweat, and the sweat, when it evaporates, cools us down. And if you then take that as a basic assumption that the most important thing here is heat, and that in order to be able to cool down that much, we needed to be naked, then you find out very quickly we needed to be standing up because you're getting a lot more wind that way. And because of that, because of this huge capability to control our temperature, we can have a big brain because this is hot. It can be cooled down. So, this is not my theory, yeah? This is Jablonski's theory. She reckons that the reason why human beings are different from the rest of the animal kingdom is because of our ability to control our bodily temperature. If we accept that as a fundamental idea, oh God, we find that all the artifacts, if you like, that we associate with culture, the buildings that we live in, the food that we eat, the clothes that we wear, has to do with controlling temperature. And what's really interesting is this is what defines us as a society, as a culture. Japanese, Chinese, Indian. even today. The clothes you wear depends on heat. And the aesthetics of this, then, is also linked to heat in that sense. Right? It looks warm, it looks cool. But more than that, people, we describe them in terms of temperature. She's hot. Nope. I think so. It's so hot, it's going to burn. He's cool. She's warm. He's cold. Hot. Cool. Even color, which is supposed to be the source of our aesthetics, is described using heat. You go to a room, it's warm. Use warm colors, use cool colors. Temperature, to me, I found and discovered, which got me really excited, heat is the source of our aesthetics. Not the visual, it's the temperature. It was found that we like hot coffee so much that we would drink coffee that will burn our tongue. This is a scientific experiment. Yeah? Chili. Nice. When you go on holiday, when do you go? The best vacation times are summer, winter, where you have that extreme of temperatures. Yeah? Feel yourself there. What are you experiencing? Is that experience visual? Is this experience visual? The question is it aesthetics? Is it about beauty? To kind of drive home the point, I found this painting. It's a painting by Rembrandt. It has a philosopher there meditating away, and if you look at the little corner, there's an old lady cooking something. And I also found two descriptions, again, not by me. Yeah, this is purely scientific. I took it from a book, description of the painting. The black background on the left-hand side increases the contrast of the white-yellow color of the window, thus giving a formidable reinforcement to the brightness of the sunlight coming through. I'm not very good at reading. You can read it yourself. Yeah, because I get that. As you read it, you can appreciate the beauty of the painting. Yes? Okay? Look at it. It's beautiful. From a visual point of view. The brightness, the contrast. Someone said, you can see the yin and yang thing there? Yeah? So this is the dark, this is the light. Beautiful visual composition. Now, another description that is not visual talks about the philosopher being taken care of. For while his thoughts are on higher things, the old woman is busy at a fire in the corner. She looks after the material things in life. She kneels on the hearth and hangs a kettle over the cheerful blaze. The firelight glows in her face and gleams. See all the fire and the heat and the warmth and the cool. Here is a promise of something good to come. And when the philosopher is roused from his musings, there will be a hot supper waiting for him. Okay? This is a different way of describing the same picture. Now, suddenly, I don't know if you noticed this, now suddenly, you are no longer looking at it, you are in the painting. You are now experiencing painting. And to me, that is the secret of architecture. When you ask me now, today, what is architectural aesthetics, I tell you it's that. So that's the theory part. Now I show you my work. You've got to show off somehow, right? So with these ideas in my mind, with these thoughts that I am not really so interested in the visual aesthetics, I'm more interested in the experiential aesthetics, I'm more interested in the idea of climate and location and all that, right? Nothing to do with the visual, everything to do with the experience, temperature, climate, heat, and so on. We decided, somebody invited me to help design Ascension Eco-City. It was really quite interesting because when I was shown the site, the client told me that there's no trees there, nothing important. Give me 2 years, I will flatten it and you can come and build Singapore. This is in China, you see, and it was like 20 years ago, and at that time Singapore was the dream of China. They wanted to have Singapore clean, beautiful, straight, flat, HDB building. They said, if you do that, give me 2 years, we'll clean it up. Fortunately, I was working with an architect who didn't care about that, and he said that he wanted instead that we design something ecological. And the first thing we did was tell the client, don't pull down, don't flatten the mountains. Don't do anything. Let the plants grow again. Don't do anything, yeah? Save money. Let the plants grow again. And then we told them that we will lift the buildings 3 stories above the ground so that the light and the wind and so on can come throughout the entire site. And we will design the whole site as a park. So now you're living in multi-story buildings, high in the sky, on a park. And because we're not building on that, we'll save you money. Then we said that we will use plants to make your spaces beautiful. And because we are doing that, your architecture can be just concrete. We'll do a good job. We'll just use concrete. We'll paint it. It'll be nice. But we won't use expensive materials. The aesthetics of your building will come from nature. Save you more money. And then we said that we will build underneath that platform 3 layers of car park. And we will make these huge holes to let sunlight come through the car park, into the car park. And as a result of that, you won't need mechanical ventilation. Save money. Then, when you want to go to your apartment or whatnot, you don't have to look at signs. You look for the sun, where the light is. Go towards the light, as they say, and you will go home. And so the idea was that when you live in this urban context, we don't expect you to do much gardening because we know you're busy, and as an urban, you want to go partying and bars and so on. Yeah, we'll do gardening. We'll do the gardens outside, managed by gardeners, which you will pay for through your conservancy charges and so on. But the minute you step out of your house, you will see gardens. And you can enjoy the garden, which is kind of right at your doorstep. Okay? Of course, we won the project. It was a competition against 5 groups, international architects, and we won the project. Okay? Unfortunately, it wasn't built because the mayor subsequently got arrested for corruption. Okay, second project. We were asked by, I'm doing okay with time.
Yes, no, you're good.
Fine, okay. We were asked by Changi Airport to design toilets. And you never, in the School of Architecture, ever go to your students and say, our studio project is a toilet. Because nobody will sign up. And as usual, when you have something that nobody wants to do, I want to do it. And I thought, if you look at airport toilets, they have no windows. They have no access to outside. How do I put plants in there? Can I put plants inside an airport toilet? If I do, how do I do that? So we started with the experience of arriving at the airport. And what was really interesting when we were talking to the management of the airport, they said, you know, although you don't like to design toilets, the toilet is the most visited place in the entire airport. Almost 100% of the people who land, first thing, they go to the restroom, freshen up, whatever, collect their baggage, and off they go. So the toilet or the restroom is very often your first sign of arrival. You are now there. You can relieve yourself. Okay? And so we said, what we will do is that we will increase the humidity as you come in, so that by the time you get to the restroom, we would have acclimatized you. Why? Because we got plants in the toilet. And these plants are from the local environment, and they need those kind of temperatures to survive. So there is a process in which we were designing so that by the time you get to the restroom, you are being acclimatized. We also realized that in such a context, the plants may not grow so well. So we designed something modular. If the plant doesn't grow, you just take it away, put in a new one. And so we designed a climatic environment for the plants. In order to keep the plants alive as well as we can, we then felt that we needed to design the whole lighting environment to correspond to the outside. So when you come in the evening, the lighting levels would suggest that it is evening. If you come at night, the lighting levels will suggest it is night. So we acclimatize you not just to the climate, but to the time zone. And being Singapore, we wanted to design something modern, something exciting. And again, when we showed this to the client, they were very excited. This is the story of my life, okay? Good, wonderful. And then they asked me, how much do you charge? That's the end of the story. I was young then, I thought I was worth a lot of money. Okay, final project, Wing Tong Park. This is a house owned by a friend of mine. And I was asked to kind of come up with a design for the house, just a simple bungalow. And I was kind of again inspired by this notion of ecology and architecture. And I started by responding to Frank Lloyd Wright. Can you see falling water there? Okay, my version, yeah. Better. And the whole idea was the architecture would reflect things that you would find in nature, like a bridge or a fallen tree across a ravine, like a cave with a light at the end. Climbing this staircase to the open walking into a clearing, using architecture to create what I thought was natural spatial typologies. Of course, at the end of the day, it was still a kind of sustainable ecological design as well, in the normal technical sense. But the thing that was driving it was the idea that when we go into nature, there were places in nature that we really liked. And this kind of almost primal ideas about place is carried in us, which can be used as a way to create architecture. Okay? Finish by quotation from Jack Forbes. He's actually a Red Indian in America. And he says, I can lose my hands and still live. I can lose my legs and still live. I can lose my eyes and still live. But if I lose the air, I die. If I lose the sun, I die. If I lose the earth, I die. If I lose the water, I die. If I lose the plants and animals, I die. All of these things are more essential to my very breath than my body. So, which is my real body? Okay? So, I'll leave that as the end. Thank you very much for all your time and for being here.